of the 80th General Convention. I'm Christine McTaggart. I'm the Communications Director for the Diocese of North Carolina, and I'm actually here at home with you guys covering the convention for all of us to share, but I am joined tonight by three members of our deputation who are in fact in Baltimore. Ain't technology grand? So with us tonight, we have Bishop Sam Rodman, we have deputies Megan Carlson and Alice Freeman, and I think all three of you had really big days today, didn't you?
There was a lot going on here in Baltimore. Thanks, Christine. And it's good to see you, Alice and Megan, because we don't get to actually be in the same place during the legislative hearings at all this year, to my knowledge, at least not to date. At least we do get together as a deputation for lunch and to compare notes. But it's a rainy day here in Baltimore, but the Orioles are playing. They had an afternoon start, and it's not raining hard enough to postpone the game. But you'd probably like to hear a little bit of what we discussed and decided in the various houses at convention today. And very excited to report that following the lead of the House of Deputies, the House of Bishops today did affirm and endorse all of the resolutions that were proposed by the working group on truth-telling, reckoning, and healing. And because I had a leadership role in that group and was very excited about the resolutions that were proposed, very pleased with some good, healthy discussion, particularly about I think the most significant piece of legislation, which was the one about forming an Episcopal coalition for racial equity and justice. And that passed unanimously in the House of Bishops. After some discussion and a brief attempt at an amendment that was defeated, because the main feeling was that what we needed to do was move forward with this work now and to trust the work that had already been done, that the accountabilities that need to be in place are taken care of in the legislation that was provided. So I believe that will be really set the tone for the life of the Episcopal Church, not just in the next 2 years, not just in the next 10 years, but really for the next generation in the life of the church, really focusing our work on dismantling racism, white supremacy, and the systemic bias that has been so toxic to our church. So very excited about that legislation. One of our other areas of work today focused on legislation that relates to one of our other priorities in the Diocese of North Carolina, and that's creation care. And we did pass and will, I think, forward now to the House of Deputies, DO64, which is about support for legislation endorsing and encouraging Green Deal legislation. And that includes the crucial work around reducing our carbon footprint. And as part of that particular resolution, there was an invitation to add to the parish parochial reports information about how you have worked to reduce your own carbon footprint. And whether that moves forward will be decided by the House of Deputies. But part of the power of that is the collective impact that would have if you gather together all of the aggregate data of what's happening at each parish, in each diocese, and then church-wide. It's a way of measuring the impact. And this is crucially important because, as we discussed in the House of Bishops, we have to achieve the goal of keeping the increase in global warming below the 1.5 degrees Celsius benchmark that has been established, because if it goes that high, it will have disastrous impacts worldwide, not just ecologically, but also economically, and of course, disproportionately affecting those who are most vulnerable. And that includes poor populations that are in the most vulnerable locations globally in terms of vulnerability to the impact of climate change. So very important work really exciting. Love to hear from the House of Deputies about some of the work you've been up to today.
I think we had some progress on work that Alice Freeman talked about before convention.
Yes, I did. Before I get to that, also in the House of Deputies, there was lots of discussion about A125 and A127, Bishop, which is what your committee worked on for so long. If you could just give us a snippet for folks back home, because it conserved, it took up a lot of time in the House of Deputies. There was great discussion around it, so it may be of interest to our folks back home as well.
Sure, Alice. Let me focus more on A127, because I said a bit about the coalition and the long-term impact of that work, which is really creating an opportunity to take the work that has been happening at the grassroots across the church and build that out, learn from what's working well, also learn what hasn't worked so well, and then provide that resourcing and opportunities across the church through this coalition that will be formed over the next 2 years. But A127 was probably the most powerful and emotionally moving testimony that we've heard throughout this entire convention, as people spoke about the experience in Episcopal boarding schools for Indigenous children. And it was heartbreaking to hear some of the stories and accounts, and chilling to hear how some of that information has been hidden and literally buried for decades. And it's time for those stories to be told, and for that reckoning to be offered, and for us to actually respond and apologize for the way that Indigenous children were treated in those schools, and in some cases lost their lives. So it was incredibly powerful, and I know there were similar stories told in the House of Deputies.
Going back, Christine asked me about A095. Before I get started, yeah, the name is Alice Freeman. You may not recognize me. The last time I did the video, I had hair. Well, here I am. It's summertime, it's hot, and I sweat. So here I am. It's gone now, but it just makes it easier for me to think while I'm here in Baltimore. And believe me, I need all the thinking help I can get at this convention. It is exhilarating. It is hard work. As a matter of fact, this is supper time right now. It's a bit after 6 o'clock in the evening, and we've got to grab a bite to eat and be back in session by 7:30 tonight. So we may go from 7:30 to 9:30 tonight. So those of you at home who think we're up here having a high time and it's a piece of cake, well, we've had some cake too, but it is certainly very challenging and long hours, starting from 8 in the morning to about 9:30 at night. A095, to celebrate and support the planting of new Episcopal communities, new churches. This was one you might recall that I had some difficulty with initially, until my committee was able to tweak it to the point that we could also include language that would include churches that have been in existence for a while, but they perhaps are struggling. This resolution also seeks to prioritize establishing new Episcopal communities and strengthening existing ones that are especially committed to mission and evangelism. And those congregations or missions that have engaging people historically who have been underserved, underutilized, disenfranchised. So that was very important to me. And a companion to that is A096. The price tag now for this implementation for planting new churches and helping those who are existing churches, that price tag is $5.8 million. And that's over a 2-year period. Because the triennial, which would normally be the 3-year period, is shortened because we go in 2024 for another general convention. And so that price tag of 5.8 million is over a 2-year period. A096 is to establish an advisory group for the revitalization of congregations to help them become sustainable congregational revitalization. It is, and they made sure to include, it is not to restore churches to their glory days. Those days are gone, but there are new ways of reinventing ourselves. And we are most excited about that opportunity.
You know, it could just be because I'm here in North Carolina, but I can't help but notice that what those resolutions are going to do sound awfully familiar in terms of maybe what we consider a priority here in the diocese.
Absolutely. I just have to tell you, when I listen to these other people from other places and hear what they are doing, I am just so proud of our diocese and our leadership in our diocese, because we are on the cutting edge of everything. And that's a tribute to our leadership, and I am so excited about it.
Well, we agree. And one of the great things watching from home was the energy in both the House of Bishops and the House of Deputies today was palpable. I mean, it came through the screen. There was no doubt about it. And Megan, I'm going to ask you, because one of the greatest sources of excitement, there were two. One was a new president of the House of Deputies was elected.
Yes, a wonderful, she's billed the first woman of color to be elected to the president of the House of Deputies. So a very exciting time. It took 3 ballots to get there for us to find a consensus and reach the minimum number of votes. So that's always exciting after a day of voting excitement around. That's going to carry on into tomorrow as we considered other positions. But yes, it'll be nice. Gay Jennings has been around for the last 9 years. Per the rules, we needed to find someone new, and we have since found her in Julia. And I'm not going to pronounce her name correctly, so I'm not going to try right now.
Ayala, Julia Ayala
Harris.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's exciting to see where she will take the House of Deputies over at least the next 3 years, until she is confirmed for the following term and term after that. So that was one of the first parts of excitement following an the morning we spent in voting for positions, and there was some excitement over doing things correctly according to a canon change that we made at the last convention, and not necessarily understanding how to do it correctly at this convention. So keep watching for tomorrow morning's voting excitement to see if we can figure it all out and do it correctly according to the church canons.
I think the parliamentarian in the House of Deputies is going to deserve a medal at the end of these 4 days. He's amazing how he's keeping all that straight.
And the chancellor, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, too, I'm going to ask Megan and Alice. There was a lot of excitement. I talk about that energy being so palpable in the House of Deputies when the State of the Church report was given. And I think it was exciting because it seemed to focus a lot of energy on the generations coming up.
Yes, it was definitely a recognition of a changing of the guard that is in process, particularly as the committee chair or commission chair, task force chair, recognized that boomers are now at the age of forced retirement in the church. There's a reflection that the church does have to look to our younger generations, our deputies, our clergy, our bishops, everyone who is slightly younger, and recognizing that the church is going to change. and letting that spirit of change sort of lead the way a little bit. So it was nice for the state of the church to sort of say, you know what, we've had an awful lot of change during COVID and we adjusted, we got through it. Let's reflect on it and see how we make the church better going forward. And what do we need to make the church better going forward?
And he also said, you older people, get out of the way. Yeah, that's what he said.
There was very little tact.
Oh, yeah, no tact. He comes from the Alice Freeman School of no tact. Yeah, he just, said, give up your positions, let young people come in. And I'm very happy. There was one thing that he said that I think I might take issue with. Someone asked the question about where are we going to get new priests? Where are we going to find new priests? He's saying the young people will do, and people were asking, where are the young priests? And the comment was made that, well, we have enough priests. Did I hear that correctly, Megan? He said that we've got enough priests. And then I thought about, well, I know churches that are looking for priests. So
yeah, it was a little bit more flippant than I think it needed to be in terms of discernment and calling of the vocation. Probably a recognition that we need to do more work in that area than his sort of, oh no, it's okay for you to retire because there are people coming up through the process.
Yeah. So,
but
the good, the bad, the ugly.
Well, we say that conversation's in progress because the
Yeah.
report was sent over to the House of Bishops. So that conversation will be continuing.
So the resolutions will be sent over to the House of Bishops, but it's the House of Deputies report from the House of Deputies committee. So the bishops don't actually have to respond to the report, but we did force it upon them.
Well, that seems only fair.
I'm sure they'll love the part about get rid of the old folks. I think I'm welcoming that. It's time to go.
There was a lot of energy in the House of Bishops. There was not a lack of energy over there.
Oh.
But I do want to sort of continue on that frame of like this younger folks, is that as we saw throughout the day, there were two very important resolutions debated at the end of the day for the House of Deputies on the next locations of General Convention. And the deputies that stepped up to speak to those resolutions were constantly the youngest deputies of their groups. It was a very sort of charged moment for the young folks saying, we recognize that we've got to start taking ownership of this, and we've got to step up, and seeing their voices get heard in that way, that it wasn't a bunch of folks with white hair or graying hair stepping up to the microphone, preaching down to the younger folks saying, all right, in 6 years, when this is your turn, we're going to put these mandates on you. No, it was, we recognize that in 6 years, we're going to be the ones there for this convention. And we want to have convention the way that we want to have convention, or where we want to have convention.
There was a lot of discussion also around future locations of future conventions. Quite a bit. Megan, you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, there was, and this is where my resolution review background sort of comes in handy, because I was having conversations with our committee chairs and secretaries that we changed the polity. If this resolution does pass, it changes the polity of the church, but it is not in any ways binding on the church for the selection committee to have to take those things into consideration, because we did not officially change the canons of the church on where the future site selection will be. But there was definitely a recognition that site selection should be mindful of sort of the political situation in that diocese, and sort of the safety and impact on the folks who are traveling to that convention, that they will have a safe space and a place sort of to do the work and not be concerned with the outside world and the impact the outside world may have on the work at that moment. Yeah, particularly around
women's health
and reproductive rights.
Yes.
Well, and you all, I know, are aware, but y'all back home may not be aware that while the site for the convention in 2024 was chosen a while ago to be Louisville, Kentucky. And I recognize that's still in conversation. But we in the Diocese of North Carolina are on the short list to potentially host the convention in 2027. So keep that in mind as these conversations continue, and we'll share more with you as we learn when some of these resolutions get passed.
Well,
Yeah, excuse me, Christine, there is one other thing I might like to mention, and that is resolution D001. That is the one that deals with funding of the chaplaincies of the HBCU to schools, St. Augustine's in Raleigh and Voorhees in Denmark, South Carolina. And that was on the consent agenda, and so it has passed. It carries with it $300,000. Each school to get $150,000 for the chaplaincy and the ministries of the chaplaincy. And so, woohoo, we'll be getting some for St. Aug, St. Augustine's, okay.
Well, and Alice, related to that, which just actually I learned through email, not part of the general convention process or budget, but also good news for the St. Augustine's chaplain. They received, this week we got word of a $500,000 grant for historic restoration of the chapel at St. Augustine's University. And Hershey Millett Stevens, our chaplain there, was instrumental in securing that grant. So another thing to celebrate.
so we've got good news coming from Baltimore to North Carolina. We've got good news coming from North Carolina up to y'all in Baltimore is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely.
Well, it sounds like it was an incredibly full day. Is there anything else that happened that you'd like to share with the folks back home?
I'd just like to say quickly 3 things. These 2 that are on the call with me, Alice and Megan, have done an outstanding job, not just representing our deputation, but in providing testimony in some of the conversations on the floor of the House of Deputies, 800 people. So I want you to know how well they are representing North Carolina in those conversations, debates, and deliberations. And we did get to hear from the new president of the House of Deputies, from Julia, after she was elected. And she was quite elegant and warm and just did a really wonderful job of expressing her excitement as she looks ahead into stepping into that role. The preacher today was the outgoing president of the House of Deputies, Gay Jennings, and I highly recommend another outstanding sermon. We got one yesterday from Bishop Curry and today from President Jennings. Really fine preaching. So check it out if you haven't seen it.
And if you're watching this on Facebook, just scroll a bit. We shared that out earlier today, so it shouldn't be too hard to find. And if not, just check out the Diocesan Hub. Everything we've got related to General Convention is there, one-stop shopping. You can find that on our homepage. So I know you guys have just over an hour to get back to your respective houses and you need to eat dinner in the meantime. So thank you so much for joining us.
Christine, one more thing, I got to tell you this.
Of course.
We're not going to be, it's not going to be short tonight. I'm sorry.
One of my friends from Louisiana came up to me and said, "Oh, I saw you on Facebook and your deputation. You all are great." And I said, "Yeah, that's our communications team. You are the envy of these dioceses here because you all are doing such fantastic work." And of course I said, "Yeah, that's our team."
Thank you very much.
And I have one last thing. I do want to say thank you to Alice for being a wonderful sort of mentor figure in this deputation, that the ability to get in front of the 800 folks and speak your piece and your story is commendable, and give someone like me who's in our first convention the strength to go up and speak on something that probably was not going to be controversial at all, but still to get up there. So thank you for modeling sort of that Christian way of living and being willing to speak when so called.
Amen. Well, thank you all. Have a good session tonight and great day. I hope you guys get to break away and see an Orioles game or do something fun while you're in Baltimore.
I'm looking right out my window, right here. The stadium. I see all the people. I see the players.
Are the Orioles winning? Can you see the score?
No, oh, well, it's 0-1. 3 hits, 3 balls, 1 strike, and no score.
Well, thank you for the Orioles update, Alice. And thank you guys again. Have a really good night.
Thank you.